Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Sunday, November the 9th, 3:32 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. As usual, if you are here live with us, you have a priority to ask for subjects of your interest to be discussed. Whenever we have like legal questions, we can, in general, discuss from a broad perspective, not too specifically, so it doesn't become like a consultation which is not allowed by the Brazilian Bar Association. All right, let's get started. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at our chat window and see if we have any subjects of interest so far. All right, and we have one. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday, YY. This is Christy. All right, Christy, good to see you over here. Please remind me about the approximate time frame to apply for a permanent residency visa once one receives the retirement visa. All right, so the timeline is going to vary depending on the route that you're going to pick. And it could have some discretion in terms of the immigration officers, but I'm going to give you a couple of, let's say, average timelines. If you are applying in Brazil, you may get initially a one-year term for the retirement residency, right? When you apply in Brazil, you get a residency. When you apply abroad, you get a visa. So if you are applying in Brazil, you get 1 year. Then you're going to renew for a second year. And after you've been in Brazil for 2 years under the retirement track, meaning the retirement residency, typically the next time you renew, you can opt for the residência por prazo indeterminado, which is like the fancy way of saying the permanent residency, right? I think it is just like the UK, if I'm not mistaken, like, they avoid saying permanent residency so they can take away if you do something bad in the country, all right? So the translation would be residency for an undetermined period of time, right? But we just say like, permanent residency to make it easier. So that's when you are applying from Brazil, in Brazil, from the get-go. If you are applying abroad, let's say if you are applying in the United States, typically you're going to get a visa. The visa is just for you to enter Brazil. But once you register at the Brazilian Federal Police, holding this visa, then they are going to give you an initial period of 2 years, potentially. And then after those 2 years, you can opt or apply for the permanent one. All right, Chrissy, good to see you over here. Bibi, oi, como vai, meu irmão? Good to see you, Bibi. So good to see you. All right, that's nice to see some familiar faces, if you will. And let's take a look. Let's take a look at the news. Let's see what's going on. And today I'm just going to take a look at a different news provider. This is Veja. Veja, I'm not sure if it is still the number one, but it has been like the number one news magazine in Brazil for several decades, right? So I remember since I was a kid, I would take a look at a newsstand, and Veja magazine would have a very special place, like in terms of the other publications. And so that's Veja, right? And the translation for Veja is something like look or see, right? Look at this, or, see what I'm saying. Something like in these lines, and that's Veja magazine. So the main heading here, the main headline is like, with not much of, or not that many attendants, the COP30 has, low expectations for its goals. And the COP30, for those of you who don't know, like the COP is an event by the United Nations. And this year, the COP, and it's on climate, right? So it's an event like to develop climate goals. And this year is being done in Belém do Pará. Belém do Pará is in the Amazon area, okay? And I just love like this area of the country. Pará is such an amazing area, such an interesting area. And that's where the COP30 is taking place as we speak. There are potentially, I'm not sure if 100 countries, but I can, tell you that there are several dozens of countries participating as we speak. And here you can see a picture of the event. Okay, and that's where they are discussing like the different goals and agendas for the COP30. All right, so this is one more source of news for you guys to consider. Veja magazine. All right, let's go back to our chat window. All right, so YY is asking when can it become a permanent? Yeah, so that was part of the answer, YY or Christy, right? I hope it was clear. So, in a couple of years, potentially that's when you're going to apply for prazo indeterminado or undetermined period of time, which is the, fancy way of saying residência permanente. All right, Matt Gain, it's good to see you, Matt. Hi, how are you? Boa tarde, Dr. Oliveira. Does Brazil have property taxes on homes and automobiles like the U.S.? If so, can you please discuss? Absolutely, Matt. Good to see you and Adrian over here. And so, yes, Brazil has property taxes just like in the United States. But the good news is that typically property taxes are not going to be funding elementary education, right? Elementary, mid, and high school. Like typically in the United States, whenever you're picking a county, the level of taxes charged, they are going to be related to the quality and the cost, naturally, of the education, of the public education in that particular county. There is no such correlation in Brazil. And so in my experience, property taxes in Brazil are typically, lower than what you would see in the United States when you compare the cost of the property in the two countries, okay? So yes, there is property taxes. The name is IPTU, which translates as property taxes of urban nature. Okay, there is this distinction. We have urban, that's IPTU. So letter U is for urban. And we have a counterpart, which is the ITR, which is like for rural property. So if you have if you have a farm, or if you have a ranch, something like this, there is a good chance you would pay ITR as annual property tax instead of the IPTU. All right. Another interesting aspect is because money is somewhat scarce in Brazil. Pretty much every single municipality is going to have a payment plan. Okay, so at the beginning of the year, you typically get a couple of options, and they're going to come as payment coupons. They're going to come in a booklet, and in this booklet, you're going to have a single installment to pay for the entire property tax for the entire year, and you're going to get the discount because you're paying in a single installment. And for most people, they are not going to be able to pay in a single installment, and therefore they are going to pay typically in 10 different installments, right, running from January to October. And when you use the payment plan, naturally, you don't get the discount, okay? But typically for Brazilians, at least, it's traditionally a good deal because then, you don't feel the burden of paying in a single hit, okay? So that's the IPTO. For automobiles, then there comes the very interesting comparison, right? Like, I mean, if property taxes are lower in Brazil, automobile taxes are crazily expensive, and in my opinion, like crazily expensive, total nonsense. Okay, you're gonna pay a huge amount of money, particularly if you have a higher end car. Very easily you could pay, like a couple of $1,000 in taxes for a single year of a high-end car in Brazil, which is just mind-blowing, right? Like, it's just something cultural, very difficult to, justify. But you know what? Like, I mean, that's Brazil. And yes, you're going to pay that that particular tax every single year, right? And foreign citizens, invariably, they get very surprised and frustrated when they find out about these taxes on automobiles. Okay, very interesting questions, Matt. All right, Nieves. Hi, how are you? How are you, Nieves? Can you tell me how many days I can visit Brazil on a tourist visa and how do they calculate it? That's an interesting question, Nieves. So there are basically two approaches nowadays, and Brazil does change that from time to time. So, if you are watching this video, not today, but maybe, like sometime down the road, just make sure to go and search for updated information, because again, it changes kind of often. And it goes like this. We have two approaches. One approach is going to be the immigration year, and the second approach is going to be the immigration semester. Okay, so for U.S. citizen, it's going to apply the immigration year, meaning that your allowed days in the country are going to be counted on a yearly basis. Okay, and for every year, you're going to have typically 90 days once you enter Brazil. And this is going to be one of the two caps, and then you're going to have a second cap of 180 days per year. The first cap is somewhat flexible, meaning that you can try to apply for an extension going from 90 days to 180 days sequentially, right? It's not guaranteed, but you can ask for it. Another strategy that, again, it may work or not. Sometimes a foreign citizen is going to be in Brazil. They're going to travel by plane outside of Brazil to a neighbor country, and when they come back, they may get or not an additional 90 days. All right, but just make sure you understand that just because you're coming back, it doesn't mean you're going to keep getting additional 90 days because of the 180 days cap. So two caps, one cap per entry and a second cap which is not flexible at all per year. The per year cap, that's the serious one and the one that we see tripping most foreign citizens because they think, just because Brazil is flexible on so many things, that they're going to give them a break, and they will not. If they identify that you've been in Brazil for over your yearly cap, they are going to send you back home without a question, all right? So that's going to be the immigration year, and then there is the immigration semester, which typically applies to many European countries. So if you're coming from an European country, chances are the immigration semester is going to apply. And for the immigration semester, you have 90 days per semester, and the consequence of looking at your higher cap on a semester basis is that you're not gonna get an extension unless the agent grants you by mistake, which we saw happening, but is very rare. So we never recommend that if you're coming from an European country in which the semester is going to apply, Don't try to get an extension because chances are you're not gonna get it. All right, and there is a visa table that Brazil provides for that matter, and this is public information, so it's not like I'm providing a consultation or advisory over here. I don't mind going into details, okay? Because again, in my understanding, this is public information, even though I agree it's not easy to understand, right? Let me see if I can shut over here. Maybe I can explain the dynamic a little better, right? And there is a version in English. Look at that. And this is the table that I'm talking about. And there is a very interesting way of identifying when we're talking about the semester. You're going to see this asterisk by the country's visa requirement, right? So just keep in mind, if there is this asterisk, we're talking about, a semester, as you can see here, 90 days every 180 days. And if there is no asterisk, then we're talking about the immigration year. So let's take a look at a couple of countries, just like we're saying, like United States. All right, United States, it says number one, no asterisk, right? Because there is no asterisk, we're talking about immigration year, a main cap of 180 days per year. And if we go to the intro part of this table, you're going to see visa required. All right. So now let's take a look at Germany. Let's see if Germany is, yeah. So Germany, just like I said, right? Germany is an European country. So you see the asterisk, meaning that you get 90 days every 180, and you cannot get an extension because otherwise, if they would allow you to get an extension, you would get 180 days within a semester, and that's not possible based on the immigration framework, right? Another interesting distinction here, you saw that United States was showing number one, which is a visa required. And guess what number 4 means? It means like a waiver for the visa. Let's confirm that. Number 4 plus an asterisk for Germany. Let's go back to the intro section. Number 4, visa exemption for Germany, all right? And then asterisk, maximum stay of 90 days every 180 days. All right, so that's how you work with this table, and you're going to see, like pretty much every single country with the visa requirement and whether it's immigration year or an immigration semester. All right. Okay. I hope that helps. Maybe a couple of other, nuances about, the counting days. Just give me a second. I'm just trying to make sure our live stream is working as it should. And all right, so can you guys hear me and see me okay? I am unable to tell for sure if it is working fine. If you could just ping in the chat window just to make sure that we have not frozen. All right, yeah. So just a couple of other nuances because this is helpful for everyone, who's watching our live stream. The counting days thing is a little bit complicated, even for the Brazilian Federal Police, and we have seen more than once people coming to us. All right, perfect. Thank you, Manso, and thank you, YY, and thank you, Christy. Thank you for confirming everything is good. So, we typically don't recommend you to count the days and work, like on borderline dates. I would recommend you to give yourself some wiggle room And, because if you're counting the days incorrectly, again, they are going to deny entry. Okay, now if you are in the country and if you overstay, in this case, you're going to pay a fine. And if you pay the fine, typically, you're not going to have an issue in terms of coming back to Brazil. Marisa Navas, boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Estamos juntos nessa live maravilhosa. Gratidão. Thank you, Marisa. Thank you, Ricardo, for your support. Thank you for being here with us. Bibi, is there more of a benefit to apply for the retirement visa over beginning the process for the temporary visa? And my wife wants to know, will Brazil tax our meager Social Security or retirement? Yes. Unfortunately, Bibi, the answer is yes. Brazil is going to tax your money no matter what type of income you have. Okay, but typically, if I'm not mistaken, there is a substantially reduced tax bracket for retirement income. All right. So yes, there is tax, but if I'm not mistaken, it is substantially reduced. And I'm saying, if I'm not mistaken, it's because they change these rules kind of often. And there was a change between 2023 and 2024, meaning that it was in effect, or it has been effective just since last year. And we typically don't handle the taxation ourselves. We have a couple of CPA partners, right? Service providers who we interact with on a regular basis. And we typically, send our clients to them for tax advisory and tax filings as well. Now, the retirement visa over beginning the process for the temporary visa. Well, the temporary visa is going to give you limited stay in the country, just like our sharing about, the time limit that you're going to have. And when you get the retirement visa, right, it means you're going to be able to stay for as long as you want. All right, Bibi, maybe that's not what you're asking, or maybe there is some nuance to it. Let me know, and we can let me know the details, and we can discuss further. All right. Mansour, if go with citizenship, which way is better to enter Brazil? Visit visa or digital nomad? Mansour, digital nomad doesn't get you anything, unfortunately, right? And the distinction here, it may be for people who know the Portuguese digital nomad. If you secure the Portuguese digital nomad, your legal stay in Portugal is going to count for citizenship and permanent residency applications purpose. But not in Brazil, right? So in Brazil, even if you could, in theory, stay in Brazil for 10 years under the digital nomad, which is not the case, you would still not be able to apply for permanent residency because, again, digital nomad in Brazil is not a valid track for you to obtain either permanent residency or citizenship. All right, no homeschooling allowed in Brazil. Public school are helpful for kids who don't know Portuguese. What if we enroll in school, but kids don't go to school? Government take action or not sending to school? That's a very interesting question. Yes, so Brazil enforces the no homeschooling rule, and many foreign citizens, they take issue with that, right? Not surprisingly, because particularly in countries like the United States, homeschooling is such a common option, right, for many parents. Well, not in Brazil. So in Brazil, if they see that you're not sending your kids to school, they would take action, right? And it's so interesting because they don't take action on so many things, right? There is so much, so many things in Brazil that are not perfect, or way less than perfect, and the government is not going to take action on those things. But if your child is not going to school, I guarantee they are going to chase you. Okay, so yes, that's very concerning. No homeschooling. Yes, you need to enroll your kids in school. It could be public or it could be private. And if you enroll and your kids don't go to school, they are going to show up. They're going to show up and do something about it. All right. Okay. Yui, good to see you, Yui. Boa tarde. What is the recent timeline you've seen for your clients or in general from becoming eligible to apply to naturalization and actually getting the certificate and passport in hand? Getting the certificate, it is taking us about a year, right? So once you qualify, you're going to organize your documents, which could easily take a month or two. Plus, translations. If you're from the United States, there is the, famous apostilled FBI background check and all of those things, and then you need to translate, right? Once you have everything, that's when we can actually file your application. And nowadays, for the final certificate to be issued, this is taking between 7 months to a year, all right? Once you have the certificate, that's when you can apply for the passport. Nobody knows how long a passport is going to take you. It could be a couple of weeks or it could be easily 3 months, right? Like it depends on whether, the government has allocated enough budget for passports, if there is the special paper used for passports, if the Brazilian Federal Police is working for issuing new passports. We never know. I can tell you it's going to range from 2 weeks to 3 months in average. All right, Yui. Okay. All right. So Dave Greeny, can a U.S. citizen with an e-visa who visited July, August, and September for 90 days travel again for 90 days starting January the 1st, 2026. David, there is the, like we were discussing about allowed stay, right? So let's assume you are from the U.S., so you typically have two caps, a cap of 90 days per entry, and you have a second cap, which is the 180 days per year. The first one is somewhat flexible, like if you stayed in Brazil for over to 90 days, and then you left the country, and then you came back, then you typically have an additional 90 days. There is discretion for the border control officer to decide if they don't like you, if they want to give you a month, they could do so, right? But typically, you get 90 days per entry as long as you don't exceed 180 days per year. And the year is not a calendar year, it's your immigration year. And typically this is calculated like this. Your first entry after November of 2017 is going to, set your immigration year, right? So let's assume you came in like March of 2018 in Brazil. So your immigration year is going to start in March of, every single year. So even nowadays, it would be starting in March, and you would have like 180 days between March of 2025 and February 28th of, assuming, dates, depending on the year, right, of 2027, all right? So you need to see when your immigration year starts, but without this piece of information, we can tell you that in general, you're going to have 180 days per year and 90 days per entry. All right, David. All right, K10. I just arrived in Rio. Congratulations, K10. I have an Airbnb for a few weeks, but I need some assistance renting an apartment for 6-month tenancy. Can your firm assist? Confirm the cost, please. Yes, rental agreements, that's not something that we typically assist on a recurring basis as a service. Typically, we're going to offer that as a service to our immigration clients, right? So if they happen to hire us for the digital nomad visa, many times they're going to say, well, and by the way, can you help me with this rental agreement? And then we're going to typically charge them a couple of hours to go over the rental agreement and let them know if there is anything concerning. Typically answer questions, because naturally when you sign a rental agreement in Brazil, it's going to be somewhat different from what you're going to do elsewhere. But in terms of pricing, I'm going to share here our email for onboarding, and then you can send us a message, right? Just saying, listen, I need help with rental agreement, and then our team, they are gonna quote you, what those hours would be, right? If you wanna attach it, like if you already have a rental agreement, you can attach to the email to get this quote. Another possibility, you would be, particularly because you're in Rio, right? You could get in touch with our real estate partner. And by the way, that was a good reminder. I'm going to share about Remax Nomad States. Nomad States is a particular Remax agency in Rio de Janeiro. And even though they're based in Rio de Janeiro, more specifically in Leblon, they actually handle transactions throughout the country. I know that they focus on, they focus on the sale of real estate, not exactly rental, but they can probably refer you out to another, rental agency in the area of your interest. Okay, so you can take a note, take a screenshot. You can see their email address and their WhatsApp channel as well. I hope that was helpful. And Mansour, can visit Visa be changed in TRC? Right, so if you want to tell me what TRC is, Mansour, then I can probably expand on your comment. Cherry Mitchell, good day. Good day. In May 2026, I will retire. Is December a good time to make an appointment for a consultation? Yes, Cherry, I think so, particularly for the planning, right? So I assume you're saying you're going to be retiring, right? In May of 2026, but there are many things that you're probably going to be handling in the meantime. And I think it's always good, right, for you to have a plan with some upfront time, so you can, maybe find a rental or organize paperwork or know what you're going to need to provide for your application. So yes, it does sound about right. Okay, we're talking about May 2026. I think that December would be a good time for a consultation sharing. And many people, they actually have more than one consultation, right? Like they may have multiple consultations, which I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Like whenever you are making life-changing decisions, like, moving to another country, I think, you do need more than a single consultation. And I'm not saying so to sell consultations. Consultations here at the firm, they are typically, a loss type of service, right? The reason why we make consultations is that, like, we hope that you're going to hire our service later on. So that's the whole purpose of the consultation. But the consultation itself, it doesn't get us any profit at all. We charge $125, and that does not cover our cost for the consultation, right? Like we are not like a a one-person shop. Like we have, like a real team with a real infrastructure in Brazil, in the United States, and Portugal. And when we allocate all those costs to the consultation, if we had to charge, we would charge way more than 125. So I'm just sharing that, to tell you guys that, booking a consultation is actually a pretty good deal. And why not, attend our live streams over here so we can have this open conversation. And I just hope it is helpful for your planning as well, Charing. All right, Mansur, temporary residency card. Temporary residence card, TRC, right? Temporary residence card. Yeah, so whatever is not permanent, it would be like temporary, right? Like, not sure if you're talking about a specific type of card, but every single residency card is going to be temporary unless it is permanent. I hope that makes sense, right? So if we're talking about the digital nomad residency, the digital nomad residency is going to be for 1 year. So it is a temporary residency card. If we're talking about the retirement residency, it's going to be typically good for 1 or 2 years. Therefore, a temporary residency card, right? So if that's the nature of the question, Mansur, yes, you can enter Brazil under a visitor visa, and then you can upgrade to, whatever you want, pretty much, right? Other than the permanent one, right? The permanent one is going to depend on a prior temporary one. But let's say you entered, and that's something that is very typical for our clients, right? Let's say the person comes to Brazil and they're enjoying the country and they say, you know what, I'm going to try to work remotely from Brazil. And guess what? They could apply for the digital nomad residency, which is a temporary residency, even though they came as a visitor, right? So good question. That's exactly the case. And a follow-up question, Mansur, if a baby is born to digital nomad parents, will it lead to citizenship for parents? Potentially, yes. At least as of today, right? Same comment I shared at the beginning of this live stream. I don't know if you're watching this live stream or this recording of our live stream 6 months from now, a year from now. I would double check just because there is a trend across the globe to reduce the entry doors for citizenship, right? That's happening in the United States, that's happening in Portugal, that's happening in Spain, that's happening pretty much everywhere. So far, we haven't seen that happening in Brazil, but it may be the case that eventually Brazil is going to jump into that wagon, right? So just keep that in mind. But as of today, yes, if you happen to be in Brazil under the digital nomad, you have a child, this would potentially give you access to the permanent residency, okay? And through the permanent residency, you could come to apply for the Brazilian citizenship, all right? So yes, that's a feasible route. Not necessarily straightforward and easy. There is always some level, of a bureaucracy and red tape in pretty much everything Brazil-wise, right? And just keep that in mind. But yes, that could be a possibility. And I would assume some people, they plan, to that purpose, right? Like to come to Brazil, stay for a while, eventually have a child, and eventually, like fix roots in the country, if you will. All right, so let's take a look if we have any other participations. Charin, yes, I do follow your show. That's why I want your firm to handle my retirement residency for me. Absolutely, Charin. Thank you for the trust. I'm very glad to have you here in our live streams, that's for sure. And as I like to share, for those of you who don't know, nowadays the retirement track is pretty high level. Okay, like in the past, it used to be more similar to like the digital nomad, something that you would renew, indefinitely. And nowadays, the retirement is gonna give you access to the permanent residency real quick. So it's a pretty big deal nowadays for someone to get the Brazil retirement, either visa if you're applying abroad or residency if you are applying in Brazil. But for any of those, ways of getting the Brazil retirement track, you're going to be securing something really high level from an immigration perspective. One downside of having the Brazil retirement residency considered as a high-level immigration pathway to Brazil is the level of bureaucracy that you're gonna face. You're gonna need an apostille for pretty much most of the documents that you're gonna be presenting. So there is, let's say, a price tag associated with this higher degree of care that the Brazilian immigration is going to require from your paperwork, right? But that's what we are here for. And yes, I do like the Brazil retirement track a lot. And it is so interesting, right? Because some people, like sometimes they're going to buy a property in Brazil and they are saying, listen, I'm going to buy the property specifically to stay in Brazil. And sometimes we identify that the person is actually receiving qualifying retirement income. And we say, listen, by all means, buy the property, right? But instead of applying for residency based on the property acquisition, you're going to apply actually for the Brazil retirement residency, which is going to get you to the permanent residency faster, and it is going to get you to the citizenship faster, right? And that's typically surprising to people because they say, well, the government is not going to get as much money from me as a retiree as, the country would get with the property acquisition, right? So it's a kind of counterintuitive, but I'm just sharing to highlight, how good the Brazil retirement route is. All right. Okay, we have Matt Gaines. If a person enters on a retirement visa, can it later be upgraded to a marriage visa if they are married to a Brazilian citizen? Yes, Matt, that's possible. Okay, so let's say you apply for the retirement, and then a year down the line, if you happen to marry, right? And I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking in general, right? If you happen to marry, 1 year down the line, you could, apply for the permanent residency based on the marriage, and then your retirement residence would be basically avoided, right? There is this rule in Brazilian immigration in which once you secure a new residency, the prior one is going to be voided automatically, right? So in your example, you're entering under a retirement visa, you're good, but then you say, well, under the retirement, it's going to take me a few years to secure the permanent one. Now I'm married. Now I'm going to apply for the permanent one right now. Yes, you can, definitely do so. Interesting question, Mania. Arman is buying me something. I don't know if it is coffee or lunch. I don't know this currency, but I certainly appreciate Arman. Really nice gesture. Thank you. Arman is asking, if I buy house in Brazil through Golden Visa, then how much residency require for TR and PR and then citizenship? All right, so the Golden Visa is the route that we were just talking about. When you buy a property, a qualifying property, in most of the country is going to be for 1 million reais. For the North and the Northeast, there will be a reduction of 30%, meaning 700,000. There are many other requirements regarding the property. If it is an existing property, it must have a construction on it. It cannot be a rural property. It gotta have clean title when you're buying. You gotta buy as a person, never as a company, okay? And you gotta send the money to Brazil in a very clean, qualifying way, meaning that you're not gonna send a bunch of wise remittances, right? You're gonna work with a fully fledged bank in Brazil, and you're gonna send this money from yourself. You're not gonna send the funds from a cousin, from a company. You need to send the money from abroad. In our procedures here, we have you sending directly to the seller through a qualifying partner currency exchange bank. So you always send it to the seller. You're not going to send it to the realtor. You're not going to send it to us. You send it to the seller. But we have a saying on when this money is going to be released to the seller. So we try to emulate an escrow, right? So Armand, let's assume that all of that happens. Typically, you're going to get a temporary residency, right, for 4 years. Okay, so typically you get for 4 years. Sometimes they mix up regulations, they give you 2, but 90% of the time you're going to get temporary residency for 4 years. And then before the 4 years expire, a couple of months, you're going to apply. And then when you apply for a renewal, you have an option to either renew on a temporary basis, which some people prefer, and other people, they are going to prefer to actually renew as a permanent residency, right? So 4 years of temporary residency, then you apply for permanent residency. And then for you to apply to the citizenship, you need to be, for this particular track, you need to be a permanent resident in Brazil for 4 years, right? So 4 years of temporary residency, 4 years of permanent residency, that's when you can apply to the citizenship. All right, Armand, thank you again for buying me coffee or lunch. I appreciate that. And let's see if we have any other participations. If not, I'm going to address something from our backlog. All right, backlog here. All right, that's a recurring one. All right, so I heard about issues when you are in a relationship with a Brazilian. For long term, they could pursue your assets. Would those assets be only from Brazil or globally? What can I do about it? Can I have like a prenuptial agreement? Can you comment on that? All right, so yeah, that's a common type of concern. Like when people are in Brazil, naturally, the chances of developing a relationship with a Brazilian is going to be substantial, and that happens naturally, right, for many people. And yes, when you are in a relationship with a Brazilian, you would probably, not potentially, but most probably enter into a common law marriage type of thing, right? Like in Portuguese, we call it união estável or stable union, right? Same kind of idea. Not necessarily a civil union, right? Like the civil union, it could also be interpreted as união estável, but when you do the paperwork, right? Like what we're talking about over here is like no paperwork, right? So you start a relationship, and a few years down the line, even though you have zero papers, you could be in a common law marriage, right? That's the definition of common law marriage. Meaning that you have zero papers, but just because you're behaving like a couple for a while, guess what? Law is going to say that, the partners are going to have protections, okay? So that's what's going to happen in Brazil after a while. And, we have prenuptial agreements. Prenuptial agreements are more typical of marriage, even though just because união estável is becoming so popular nowadays, some registries, they are allowing a prenuptial agreement even for união estável. It's kind of weird, but it is how it's working nowadays. Now, I like to say that in Brazil, prenuptial agreements, they don't hold much water. Just because judges, they have a broad discretion in Brazil, and typically they are going to be interested in protecting like the weakest partner. And so let's say if you are a foreign citizen with lots of resources, and then you get a prenuptial agreement saying that the Brazilian party is not going to receive anything or is going to receive too little, the judge most probably would just ignore that and say, you know what, I see the prenuptial agreement, but, for fairness, I'm going to decide on something else, right? So, unfortunately, prenuptial agreements, they don't hold much water in Brazil. All right, that's the comment that I have. And let's move to the next one. It looks like we don't have any other topics or comments so far. So let's look at the backlog. All right. FDTS. I have FDTS for work that was done over 3 years ago. I heard that once 3 years are completed, I can draw my Social Security from Brazil. Is that true? How can I do it? All right. So for those of you who don't know, like FDTS is like a fund. Like when you're working in Brazil, your employer and part of your salary, they are going to go to a specific account. And, FGTS is like Fundo de Garantia, or something like, not sure if Social Security is more like, works compensation probably, right? Like trying to make a parallel between FGTS and works compensation. So it's a fund. Let's say if you are fired, typically you're going to have access to those funds. But many foreign citizens, they come to Brazil, they work for a while, for a few years, and then, eventually they finish up whatever they, came here to do. They go back to their countries of origin, of, original residency, and then, eventually they can draw those funds. And the rule here is interesting because you're talking about the 3 years, which is correct, right? Like 3 years after the employment relationship is over, yes, you can petition to draw your funds, but it's not exactly 3 years because there is this weird rule that says that after 3 years, on the month of your anniversary, after or on or after the month of your anniversary, you can petition for the release of the funds, right? So it's very weird because let's say if I'm completing 3 years, let's say in April of 2026, but my month of anniversary is March, guess what? You are out of luck. You're going to need to wait until 2027 to, petition the release of the funds, right? It makes zero sense from a, common sense perspective, but again, it is what it is. Now, in terms of drawing, there are pretty much 2 tracks from my perspective. One track is going to be for you to come to Brazil a bunch of times and release this money yourself, right? You go to the Caixa Econômica, which is the bank in charge of the FGTS, and you go there, you sign papers, it doesn't work the first time, you come for a second, you open a bank account, you renew documents. On the 3rd or 4th trip to Brazil, you're going to be able to take this money home, right? That's how it's going to work. Or the other route is for an attorney to file a legal petition with a judge. Typically, we like to do it in Brasilia, which is the capital of the country, in which the federal government is based, and Caixa Econômica, which is the bank from the government, is based as well. And through this attorney, eventually they get a court order to lift your monies, and through Currency Exchange Bank send this money to you abroad, right? So that's pretty much the two routes. There is always this talk of, a power of attorney. A lot of people, they contact us, well, can you help me get a power of attorney? So a friend I have in Brazil can, draw this money and send it to me. And it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. The number one reason is Caixa Econômica is going to resist. Like, they're concerned that the power of attorney is fake, or if it is, even if it is legit, if it wasn't done exactly, by the dots and T's, they're going to be liable for the money that was taken from you. That's the number one concern, right? So typically, power of attorneys, they don't get you through the finish line. That's the first concern. The second one is, many clients or people, they're going to say, well, I have this friend, I really trust and this and that. And, eventually, if this person would get the money, just the complexity of sending this money abroad and potentially the temptation of using this money would be enough of a concern for us to agree with this route. So we never handle the power of attorney in any circumstances. It does not matter how much a client would ask us. The only route that we handle here at the firm is the judicial route, right? Through the judicial route, this thing keeps moving even when Caixa Econômica, the bank, resists. Eventually, the judge is going to order the money to be released. We can have this money sent to a temporary account with the currency exchange bank. They exchange the money and they send it to you abroad. Very clean and guaranteed, right? Even though it's going to take a while, just like everything else, at the end of the day, we're going to accomplish what you're looking for. All right, I hope that was helpful. Let's take a look. All right, that's going to be the final one. We are a couple of minutes from finishing up our live stream. Remember, we have another session on Wednesday. Okay, on Wednesday, instead of meeting at 3:30 p.m. Rio de Janeiro time, we meet at 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. All right, and that's going to be David. David is asking, would the LA consulate be the place in California to determine how many days Brazil calculates I have visited? How do I find out how many dates Brazil has calculated? David, for sure, not the LA consulate, San Francisco consulate. Consulates in California, the Brazilian consulates in California, they are just horrible, okay, in terms of responding. We have many cases in which someone, is going to be reaching out to the consulates in California, and they are going to basically ignore your emails, right? They don't take calls. At least last time we tried to get in touch with the Brazilian consulate in San Francisco, they wouldn't take calls, and our clients would send emails. Emails would not be answered. So I don't see much hope, David, for you to get anything out of the Brazilian consulate in the United States. There would be a question for you to be answered, unfortunately, in Brazil by the Brazilian Federal Police. So when you are in Brazil and when you typically go to the Brazilian Federal Police in person, right, not calling, not sending emails, they are going to kind of calculate and tell you how many days you have left, all right? So I wish it would be, more, it would be easier, David, but that's what we have as an experience, okay? So I want to thank you, all of you, for your participation today. Very interesting comments and questions, and reminding you to join us on this coming Wednesday, and wishing you all a blessed rest of your Sunday.